Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Gooding, and I'm Associate Professor of Music Therapy at Florida State University. And today I'm here with my colleague.
I'm Alejandra Ferrer, and I am also Associate Professor of Music Therapy at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee.
And we are excited to be here with you today to talk about one of our favorite topics, and that's music majors and mental illness. What should we know? So we're going to jump right in and share some important information with you and then talk about some strategies and things to consider in working with music majors who have mental health conditions. So a little background, and we are going to read all the points on the slide and then add some additional information, of course, but for accessibility purposes, we're going to make sure that we read everything on the slide. So our first point in terms of background information is just a basic statistic, and that is that 36% of American students were diagnosed with a mental illness in 2017. So that's some of the most recent information we have, but that's over a third of American students have been diagnosed, at least as of 2017, with a mental illness. We also know that 1 in 3 American young adults, and those are young adults ages 18 to 25, experience a mental illness. And then in addition to the 1 in 3, 1 in 10 American young adults experience a serious mental illness. And so serious mental illness is a condition like schizophrenia, some of the more substantive mental health conditions. You know, any mental health condition can impact the way students move and navigate through the world. But some of the more serious mental illnesses can have substantial impacts on their day-to-day abilities to function. Alejandra, I know you have some great information on this, so you want to share a little bit more about?
Well, I think you said it very nicely, Lori, and it is that the serious mental illness is more accurately defined as the type of illness where the symptoms are so pervasive and so severe that it really does result in a disruption to the person's daily life. And that disruption generally has significant consequences. So for a college student, it could be dropping out. It could be, continuous absences. For a member of the community, it could be arrests. It could be problems securing housing and problems keeping a job.
Right. So really potentially detrimental and negative impacts on their day-to-day functioning.
Yes.
So our third point in terms of background information is that increases in mental health conditions have been found in students in a range of countries, including Australia, Belgium, Germany, Mexico, Northern Ireland, South Africa, Spain, and the United States. So even though both of us are in the United States and working with students in an American context, this is not a uniquely American issue. Students all over the globe are experiencing increases in mental health conditions. So this is a much more global issue that we need to really be thinking about. And then finally, our fourth point, and a very timely and important one at that, is that the COVID pandemic and other events such as economic issues and racism are further increasing mental health concerns, putting millions of students at even greater risk. So the things that impact the mental health of our students are multifaceted.
Yeah.
So COVID is certainly a big one, economic issues, racism, access to schooling. There are a number of things that can impact students and contribute to poor mental health. All right. So let's talk a little bit about challenges for students majoring in helping professions. And so broadly speaking, we're talking about helping professions. These are professions in which students are training to be in service to others. Right? And so music education and music therapy, for example, would both be considered helping professions. So we've got 4 points that we're going to highlight here because these are important to put context around some of the struggles and challenges that our music majors, like those music ed and music therapy students, might be facing. So the first point is evidence consistently suggests that disclosing a mental illness on applications may be viewed unfavorably and may diminish chances of getting admitted. So when we're talking about getting admitted here, we're talking about college admissions. And so disclosing mental illness on your application could impact your ability to get into a college or university. And because of this stigma and discrimination that students face, many of them choose not to disclose, which can have problems in and of itself as well. Right? So on one hand, you may struggle to get in if you disclose. On the other hand, not disclosing may actually impact your ability to navigate through the college and university environment. So it's important considerations.
Yeah, and not disclosing it once you are in, as you mentioned, Lori, can result in you not receiving the services that could help you be successful. In order to receive accommodations from the university, you must disclose the mental illness or the disability formally. And so, you know, if you are scared because of the stigma, because of the taboo nature of mental illness or disability, it stops you from disclosing this and getting the help that you need.
Absolutely. So our second point is that mental health diagnoses are associated with lower GPAs and withdrawing from college. So experiencing a mental illness while you are enrolled in a higher ed academic program can have detrimental impacts on your ability to move through your degree program. And that's not to say that all students with mental illness struggle. That's certainly not the case. But we do know that generally speaking, mental health diagnoses are associated with overall lower GPAs and then leading to issues like withdrawing from school. And so there's important considerations to think about, again, tying back into that support services or those support services that student might need to be successful in a college environment. We also know, in terms of our third point, that helping professions majors may be at a unique risk for adverse mental health concerns due to stress, burnout, and the rigor of their academic programs. So we know that helping profession degree programs are challenging. There is a tremendous amount of academic rigor, and then there's also the added aspect of clinical interactions or community interactions. And managing all that can certainly be stressful and can lead to burnout. And that can cause problems for these helping majors as they navigate through their college experience.
Yeah. It's interesting to mention too that research shows that people going into helping professions oftentimes go into them as a result of their own experiences with mental health issues or other types of struggle. So we are walking into a profession that is going to be challenged academically, as well as you were talking about the emotional toll that many of these professions take on the person with a high degree of vulnerability because of our own experiences with mental illness.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so subsequently, that brings us to point 4, which is that helping profession students face additional stresses caused by things like challenging placements and placement performance anxiety. So because they are navigating perhaps their own mental health needs and conditions, they're navigating the rigor of the academic program. And as I mentioned earlier, they're navigating the added layer of community placements. That's a very challenging context that can add additional stress on for these students, particularly if they're really striving to do well in those placements. So that performance anxiety, doing well in the placement, can add a unique layer that is on top of the many things that they're already facing in terms of challenging situations.
And something else, Lori, that I have been thinking about and that happens a lot is a lot of the times the placement itself triggers or exacerbates the symptoms of a mental illness. We see that in music therapy a lot. Students are being triggered by the academic content more so when they are in the clinical setting working with clients.
Absolutely. So that speaks to that challenging placement aspect, certainly. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at music majors and mental illness.
So here are some important stats specific to music majors. Music majors appear to have higher rates of mental illness and or mental health concerns than other non-music majors. And we see this across the creative arts majors and careers. Music majors report moderate to high levels of stress. So we all know how consuming it is to be a music major. It's not just our academic coursework, but it's also the practicing of our principal instrument and secondary instruments. It's also the ensemble rehearsals. It is the type of major where the student is truly engaged from the time that they wake up until very close to the point where they go to sleep. Whereas in other careers, students are taking, 3, 4 to 5 courses, and a lot of the times their afternoons and evenings are free to rest and to do their homework and be with their friends. It allows more time for self-care. Some music students, like music education and music therapy majors, may be at greater risk for mental health concerns. This is congruent with people who are interested in going into helping professions. Oftentimes, it's a result of their own experiences with mental illness or disability. Lastly, higher rates of mental health conditions like anxiety and depression have been identified among music majors in countries like the USA, Norway, and the United Kingdom. It's important to say that anxiety and depression are the most prevalent, followed by mood disorders. So for example, bipolar disorder, also other anxiety disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder are some of the most common ones.
Yeah. And that anxiety and depression component is really important to consider in relation to the fact that there are higher levels of stress for music majors that they're experiencing. So that environment may be exacerbating conditions like anxiety and depression just by virtue of being in it.
A few more. Depression, anxiety, and stress are concerns among music majors. We see this in our classrooms. We see this in our schools on a daily basis. Students coming to faculty reporting symptoms of depression and anxiety that are interfering with their ability to complete their homework assignments, turn their assignments in with timeliness, attend class, just function as they are expected in the classroom. Undergraduate music majors exhibit symptoms of burnout. We see many times, especially in music therapy, and I would assume that this is similar in music education too. I don't know if you've seen the research, Lori, where students become burnt out of music itself. The music therapy student who then becomes a music therapy major no longer engages in music for themselves and loses that very close, intimate relationship with music because now it's a part of their work. And it also resulted in so much stress during their years of study.
Yeah, absolutely.
Music performance anxiety is one of the most worrying problems for university and conservatory students, with prevalence rates ranging from 21 to 50%. And again, as musicians, we know that performance anxiety is something that many of us experience and that it can be quite detrimental to our health, not just in the moment of the performance, but all of the weeks and the days working up to it. If I translate this to music education and music therapy majors, I'm thinking of students who are constantly needing to perform, who are constantly needing to put themselves out there in front of their students, in front of their clients, in front of people who are observing them. Invisible illness, invisible disabilities, such as a mental health condition, may impact music therapy and other music students' practical experiences and result in physical, psychosocial, and cognitive symptoms. So we talked about students being triggered by what they are seeing, what they are observing in their classrooms, as well as their clinical settings. And then some researchers have found poor rates of stress management among music majors. And this tends to be congruent with just the college population in general, not knowing how to adequately deal with stress, anxiety, and depression. We see that there are challenges with resilience now. We see that there are challenges with accessing positive coping skills, accessing self-care practices, and realizing that self-care is not something that we do if we have time, but something that we have to do on an ongoing basis in order to stay healthy.
Absolutely.
Degree-related mental health factors. Music therapy majors consider themselves different from other students. I think there is the idea, not just the idea, but there is a lot of truth in this. Perhaps somebody who's more sensitive, perhaps somebody who has a greater degree of emotional awareness, therefore may be more in tune with their feelings of sadness and anxiety. Somebody who has a higher degree of empathy. We could see how all of these could contribute to mental illness truly having an effect on the person's life. The major itself presents unique and difficult challenges, including things like workload and time commitment. This is what we mentioned in a previous slide. It's not easy to be a music major because of the amount of responsibilities, not just academic, but practicing of the instruments, ensemble participation, attending concerts. A lot of students may be holding down a job at the library, but they're also gigging, in the evenings, which again compounds that stress. Irregular schedules typical in music degrees can be challenging and can intersect with other challenges like financial challenges to induce substantial amount of stress for students. I always am in disbelief when our students tell us we work part-time, 20 hours a week. Some of them, we work full-time, all evenings, entire weekends. And you wonder, how do you do this? How is it that you're still standing up?
Right, right. And I think it's important to recognize with all of these that, we are both music therapists. And so we certainly see this in our music therapy students, but I also have the opportunity to interact with music education students, and you see many of the same things. So it's, and I would argue that you probably see it in many of the music majors, regardless of the specific area. So these things are going to be common across all of our music students.
Yeah. So what can we do? How can we support our students to be successful? We know that within the classroom, there are things that we can do, the university community can do, as well as the external community. So some of the things that we can do to help: inform both faculty and students about resources available for students with mental health needs. Provide information through a variety of platforms. So perhaps we include something about the Disability Resource Center in the syllabus. Maybe on, if we have some type of virtual platform, we can put something there. In places within the university where students tend to gather, this would be a great place to provide this information so that students know that help is out there. For teachers to mention it in the classroom, we need to be sort of at the forefront of normalizing that our students are struggling, but there is help out there. There is help and there is hope out there. Identify local providers or resources who understand musicians' health needs and make that information readily available to students. So perhaps there are counselors, there are therapists within the university community or the community at large that truly are familiar with what the experience of a music student is like. They are familiar with the rigors of being a music student, music education, music therapy, music performance. And then offer music-specific programs, workshops, and other events that help students connect, learn coping strategies, and promote awareness of available supports. So we know that strength can be found in numbers, and students who are able to relate to each other, it decreases that isolation and loneliness that often accompanies having a mental illness. To know that I'm not alone, that somebody else is struggling in a similar way, can be an important part of that healing journey.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to, a couple of slides ago, we talked about how students, music majors, consider themselves different from others. So having someone that understands you as a music major, understands what that's like, and then having resources or information tailored to the needs of those music students is really going to better provide the supports that they need.
Yes, and Lori, we see this too in the music therapy research, how important it is to have like-minded friends. So, we're narrowing even more so with music therapy students and professionals because there are so few of them. So even more so, it's important to find someone that you can relate to both personally and professionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other ideas of how we can help and support our students. Implement prevention, detection, and treatment strategies in order to improve the psychological health of music students. Something that a lot of professors are doing. I have heard about this anecdotally following the COVID-19 pandemic, is implementing wellness practices into their coursework. So whether that's journaling in order to increase self-awareness, or making sure that students are carving out the necessary time to engage in self-care practices, talking about it, right? We're not going to wait until the student can handle no more, but we're going to actually be proactive and begin as early as we can. Encourage and help students to develop and implement self-care plans. There are programs out there, there are universities that are offering courses that students can take for credit where the topics are self-care and wellness. Encourage faculty to provide health education. This is important because faculty have been identified by students as a main source of health-related info. So a lot of the times students will confide in their teachers that they are struggling with a mental illness. They will more readily go to the teacher than they will to a counselor or somebody with whom they don't have that personal relationship. A lot of the times what I have heard from my colleagues who teach private lessons is my private lessons often become a time of self-disclosure for the student who's really having tremendous struggles.
Yeah. Yeah, that speaks to the importance of a very holistic approach. So here we've talked about prevention and detection in addition to the treatment. Earlier, we talked about having resources and providing information about those resources in multiple formats. And now we're also connecting in the importance of the role of the faculty members and that one-on-one interaction. So I think that really speaks to the need for a comprehensive, holistic approach. Yeah. All right. So our last bit of advice that we want to talk about in terms of how we can support music students is centered around two important components of degree programs in higher education. The first is advising. So construct advising practices so that they support students. This includes encouraging student responsibility for the degree path, checking in regularly, and maintaining awareness of stressors and challenges in music professions. So our advisors have to encourage students to have some autonomy and make decisions. That's an important part when you have that ownership that helps them progress through more effectively. But it's not just about autonomy. You're going to have autonomy with the right amounts of support. So that involves checking in regularly and also as the advisor staying on top of or aware of what's happening in terms of stressors and challenges in the degrees, in the music professions, and so on to better support the students. So really having good advising practices, and I can tell you from looking at the literature, there's not a lot about advising practices in music. So this is an area where we need more information to ensure that we are actually supporting students in the right ways in terms of helping them progress the way they need to. And then another important one is to inform students about ADA protections through assignments, guest lecturers, or other methods. Alejandra mentioned the student resource centers, the accessibility center. Sometimes they used to be called disability resource centers, but the names are changing now to accessibility resource centers and various other iterations of the name. But often students are unaware that they can get the supports that they need through this office and through legislation or regulations like ADA. And so it's important that we connect them, one, with the fact that they can get supports, two, connect them with the process that they have to undergo, because as we also mentioned earlier, you have to be registered, you have to go through a process to receive the supports. And then three, make sure that they're encouraged to seek out those supports. I've seen many students who have said, no, I've got this, I can try this on my own. And they may be doing really well, but I always encourage them to register. They don't have to use the supports if they don't need them, but if they find themselves in a situation where they need them and they're not registered and they haven't gone through the process, then they don't have access to the supports. So helping them understand how the regulations work and then how they at their individual university can go about getting the recognition, the acknowledgement of those of the services that they need and get those implemented so that they can use them when they do is really important. So
I was
go ahead,
going to
Alejandra.
mention, Lori, just the proactivity that is needed both
Absolutely.
on behalf of the student as well as the faculty. The student needs to turn in all of the information and paperwork necessary to get help, but they need to know from the faculty that help is out there and that this is what you need to do in order to access it. And it's interesting what you were mentioning about constructing advising practices that are more holistic in nature. What we're seeing is that advising is really focused on the academic development of the student, the academic coursework, but really it isn't necessarily a relationship of mentorship or checking in and ensuring that the student is doing well academically, but also personally. And so being aware of that and how can we make those advising sessions more meaningful and more intentional.
Yeah, and our governing bodies like NASM have started talking about musicians' health and wellness, which mental health would be part of. And there is some movement on that, but we still have much more that we need to do in both a global sense and then at each of the universities individually to really ensure that we're providing supports across a spectrum of needs, including mental illness, and then helping students know how to access those supports and making sure they're getting the correct information across time. So that is a very quick overview of what we have learned as we have explored this topic. I'm going to scroll through quickly. There's a number of reference slides. We're not going to read those, but we are happy to share them if anyone would be interested in them. And you are welcome to reach out to us, and you can see both of our emails here. Mine is lgooding, LGOODING at fsu.edu. And Alejandra?
Mine is Alejandra, ALEJANDRA, period, Ferrer, FERRER, at BELMONT.edu.
So if you have any, if you'd like the references or you have any questions or just want to chat more about this, this is a topic that we've been exploring for a few years now and we're really engaged in, and look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for your time. Have a great conference.
Yeah, thanks everyone.